An outline of Esoteric Science, Cassette 6, first side. The law and reincarnation. The law is the law of karma. One of the best short statements of what the law is the following. Karma is the ultimate law of the universe, the source, origin and fount of all other laws throughout nature. Karma is the unerring law which adjusts effect to cause on the physical, mental and spiritual planes of being. As no cause remains without its due effect, from greatest to least, from a cosmic disturbance down to the movement of your hand, and as like produces like, karma is that unseen and unknown law which adjusts wisely, intelligently and equitably each effect to its cause, tracing the latter back to its producer. Though itself unknowable, its action is perceivable. That is a quotation from the Key, chapter 11. We have seen in previous cassettes that the essential nature of cosmos and all its constituents is in fact composed of lives, covering in their degrees the whole gamut of the total life of the cosmos. There is nothing that is not life, manifesting in a particular way, be it energy, force, substance or organism. This one life, of which all lives are, so to speak, flames or sparks lit at the one flame, is two-aspected when cosmos is in being and active, that is, during Manvantara. These two aspects constitute, as we have pointed out before, polarity. The one is active, positive, energetic, dynamic, in sex, male. The other is substantial, passive, receptive, confining, the basis of form, in sex, female. One is spirit, the other is substance, or matter. But we must always remember that these are inseparable. They are two aspects only of one thing. Matter, or substance, to have being at all, must contain spirit, and spirit, to be anything at all, must be contained in or operate through substance. At the highest level in cosmogony, this polarity cannot exist. It arises as the first stage of manifestation, but cannot of itself have any meaning or effective significance in the process of forming a universe without the involvement of Mahat, universal mind, and without the contents, divine ideation so to speak, of this mind being imparted as inherent design or quality on the polar combinations. This is first on the highest or most subtle of the inner planes as archetypes, and then reflected into and through the descending planes through to the formative astral realms where exist the patterns to be projected into the physical world. This means that matter in all its forms, from the most rudimentary form imaginable, even as pre-atomic particles, if we can use such an expression, is invested at birth or creation with some characteristic properties. All forms are, by reason of these, fit to fulfill whatever their role might be in the constitution and operation of cosmos. This process applies from the very lowest to the highest or most evolved levels. We get, as we move up the scale of being, atomic combinations, molecules, complex organisms, and lastly, visible forms in all the kingdoms of life on our planet. Now, what this rather long introduction is intended to say is that because the qualities imparted both to the spirit and to the matter side of whatever we may be considering, there is in it that which we might call a characteristic conditioning, within the limits of which it must fulfill its function in its particular way in the overall scheme of things. And because all life in some degree is sentient and intelligent, in however rudimentary a way, as we have said before, it knows, in a sense, what it has to do. This knowing, in the very lowly components or organisms of cosmos, is the basis of that intelligence which expands by stages through the kingdoms of nature, until it becomes what we know as mental intelligence, reasoning power, and even wisdom. The process of development of this intelligence doesn't stop with the human kingdom. It goes on into the superhuman kingdoms of the Jan Chohans. In such a way, there is not a region in or aspect of cosmos that is devoid of intelligence of an order commensurate with its grade and place. There's some information about that in the Secret Doctrine, first volume, page 38. The universe, therefore, taken as a whole, is intelligent. It is, so to speak, the collective intelligence of all the lives comprising it. In other words, the universe, like everything, or more properly every being, in it knows what it has to do, and how to do it. Not only in isolation, but in complete harmony with all the other lives, also about their own business. All these lives, at one level, aggregate together to form units in and of a larger life form, and so on up the scale of being, the collective knowledge expanding as we go. This knowledge is the collective aggregate of the knowledge of each of its parts. It is knowledge in the sense of inherent capability and the knowledge of experience. But there is, as it were, a total knowledge which is greater than the aggregate of these parts, constituting a larger unit being. The practical application of this universal knowledge is the law by which the universal process is governed. Rather, the law is that universal process. It is so not only for the universe as a whole, but for all its infinitesimal detail. The whole process, looked at another way, is self-regulating throughout the whole piece. This process, or law, is said in the books to be deity, and vice versa. Deity is law. There is probably no bigger single statement of truth made in occult literature than this. We have become familiar with the idea of the unity of the universe, and we will have more to say on this theme later. But there is nothing more important to realize than that the basic unity, the one, and the law are the same. Another vitally important thought is that the law is never not working. Being one with the Absolute, it always is. Just as a man, whether asleep or dead, has his eternal being, so that he too never is not. He, as does the universe, wakes up or comes round again and again, either for another day's activity in the short term or another earth life in the long term. There has been a habit among theosophical students to make distinctions too readily and too often between the aspects of the one in manifestation, for example, between the objective and the subjective universe. The term universe is qualified by H.P.B., who says in The Secret Doctrine that it means our solar system and what is visible around it. That's from Volume 1, page 12. Our thinking, our learning, our talking, perhaps, demand this fragmentation, this dealing piecemeal with what is in reality always a whole. We think separately of the substance of the universe, of its conditions as elements, of its forms with their inherent and actual designs. Then we think of the life side of things, levels of consciousness, the feelings that move us, the laws by which the whole process works, all distinctly as subjects in themselves. We too readily overlook the fact that they are all and always one. Nothing illustrates this better than Edwin Arnold's poem, The Light of Asia. In the verses towards the end, which are summarizing the Buddha's teaching, he is stressing that there is one power, but it is a power which manifests multifariously in everything in nature. Before beginning and without end, as space eternal and a surety sure, is fixed a power divine which moves to good. Only its laws endure. This is its touch upon the blossomed rose, the fashion of its hand shaped lotus leaves. In dark soil and in the silence of the seeds, the robe of spring it weaves. That is its painting on the glorious clouds, and these its emeralds on the peacock's train. It hath its station in the stars, its slaves in lightning, wind, and rain. The ordered music of the marching orbs it makes in viewless canopy of sky. In deep abyss of earth it hides up gold, sards, sapphires, lazuli. Apart from its universal general nature, as instanced in these verses, we have perhaps too commonly accustomed ourselves to think of the law as it relates particularly to ourselves, as karma. Most of us accept that somehow our present life is conditioned to a large extent by what we have done in the past, even in past lives. We have the idea that so-called good or bad fortune is dispensed by karma. What we tend to forget is our own responsibility for our condition. We feel that somehow blaming karma removes the blame from us, but we forget that we make our karma individually and collectively. Edwin Arnold, to quote him again, puts it beautifully. That which ye sow, ye reap. See yonder fields. The sesamum was sesamum, the corn was corn, the silence and the darkness knew, and so is man's fate born. He cometh, reaper of the things he sowed, sesamum, corn, so much cast in past birth, and so much weed and poison stuff, which mar him and the aching earth. This aspect of the law has, perhaps, become so familiar to many of us that we no longer heed it. It ceases to shock us as a new idea would. Perhaps by putting the law into a universal setting, as we are doing here, we will grant it more majesty and power, more urgency, so far as we individually are concerned. It does govern the universe, or rather it is the universe ordering itself, because it can't do otherwise. If we could realize this, and our inseparable part in the overall process, we might see that nothing, individually or collectively, can avoid, resist, or surmount the law. It is the inexorable order of things. If we do realize this, two questions arise. One is, what about our free will? And the other, what can or ought we to do to live in accordance with the law? Insofar as we have to accept the results of our past deeds, our free will cannot apply. It has no effect. But we can live from now on so as not to offend the law. Perhaps we can even make amends to redress the balance. As to how we can cooperate with the law is the subject for another cassette, number 12. But we can begin to get the idea that our very being, in all its diversity of character, is itself part and parcel of the whole. That its ordered process and progress applies inescapably to each of us. We have to learn this to the point of never forgetting it if we would learn to live in harmony with the law. We violate it only to our cost and to the retardation of our evolutionary progress. We do, however, have freedom of choice as to how to act in any circumstance. Whether or not we can give effect to what we choose to do is another matter. Having regard to our circumstances, our personal limitations, or to the overriding natural forces which condition so much of our lives, our free choice avails us only up to a point. We can't eat nice food, for example, however much we might want it or could pay for it, if drought or war has ravaged our land and there is no food at all to eat. So free will, so-called, is at best limited and conditional. But we will return to this personal aspect of the law's effects on the second side of this cassette. Now let us look at the law in its various other and more general aspects. First, we see it as the total process of nature, because the two, the process and nature, are again inseparable. We've already noticed one aspect of the law's working, that of alternation. Everything comes, stays a while, then goes. As far as our objective world is concerned, things come into objective existence, that is, we can see, feel, touch them, etc. We can, so to speak, cognize them through our senses. When they go, die or disintegrate, we can no longer sense them. But we are beginning to see that in the occult view, they do not then cease to be or to become nothing. Something of them persists in what to us, here and now, are the subjective realms. We shall see how this applies in the case of man. When his body dies, his various inner essences or principles persist, according to their nature and function at their respective levels in the inner worlds, for a time, until only the immortal, enduring spiritual ones remain. We have learned that nothing happens or has being, but that it leaves an indestructible impress on the tablets of the astral light. In this way, the design, pattern, or model of anything is preserved. The elementals have their abode in these inner realms. they can and do enliven these patterns. Material can be collected by the elementals to clothe the immaterial but persisting patterns, and thereby project something into objective existence. Examples of this process are materializations at spiritualistic seances. This, however, is in fact the general process of creation in nature. There are, and always were, the pre-existing patterns in the invisible realms. The materials and builders were always there to bring forth in due season the forms needed for the grand evolutionary program. The common process is that of the previous living form or entity leaving behind it a residue or seed containing within itself, potentially, the patterns and lifestyle of the one of its kind to succeed it in the next life or period of becoming. The periods of becoming and activity alternate with those of withdrawal and rest. These cycles of becoming and dissolution are out-breaths and in-breaths. Everything in nature, from the universe to the humblest thing in it, breathes in this way. These are all according to the law of becoming and withdrawal, the law of cycles. The seed, similarly, also applies universally. What was determines what is, and what is determines what is to be. This is the law of causation, or more properly, of cause and effect. For there to be a seed with all its potentialities, there must have been a plant with all the characteristics now locked up in the seed. For there to be a human being in incarnation, there must have been parents to transmit to their offspring physically their contribution to its personal characteristics. The chain is continuous. But plants and parents during their lives experience many things. Some of this experience changes them. It changes them maybe superficially and in the short term, but also it is passed into their inner principles. These inner principles are also modified, be it ever so little in a lifetime. But life persists through many forms, many incarnations, and the human ego passes into many bodies. As the inner principles are modified, these changes, even the slightest, are transmitted via the psychic seed, so to speak, from the old personality to the new personality. This is the inner mechanism of evolution. It is the way of achieving progressive development of form and character in time. This chain of causation is another aspect of the law. An understanding of it gives us a clue to the immediate purpose of universal life. It is the unfolding of the potentialities of spirit, of growth in the inner and outer realms of being, through the ever-increasing capacity of the vehicles of life to respond to higher and higher impulses from the higher levels of being. Each of the levels becoming nearer and nearer to perfection, the nearer it approaches the final reality. Our universe proceeds on ordered lines, according to law, and this ordering applies at all levels. It is the result or effect of inherent intelligence as we've defined it, at work through the hierarchies of beings, from the rulers through to the servants. The whole process is guided at every level by the abilities of the lesser lives at that level to respond to the governing intelligences above them. Hence the hierarchical structure, the upper always guiding the lower. Every aspect fits into its place and does what it has to do. It is apparent that there are powers and forces playing even within the structure of matter, keeping the atoms in their places, determining how those of one kind of characteristic shall react to and with others with different characteristics. For example, some attract, some repel, and atoms of one kind will combine normally with a given number of another kind and in no other way. How do they decide? When a plant grows, it selects just the chemicals it needs from the soil for its growth and well-being. From all the possible foods offered, how does it know what to choose? It's because atoms and plants, and even their components, have the right kind of intelligence to do so. Insects and animals know how to do complex things, to get food, to procreate, and bring up their young. Nature knows in all her departments. What she can do on the minutest scale, she can and does do on the largest. She begets and nurtures and then destroys in due season whole worlds, solar systems, and universes. When they are in being, she regulates her economy exactly to their requirements. She fixes their places in the heavens and their movements. She determines to a nicety their mutual attractions and repulsions. In her overall economy, everything is sustained by something else. A balance has to be maintained for the survival of her offspring. This applies to whole worlds, not just their inhabitants. But as is observable, nature, not everything, comes to a proper maturity. It can fall victim to a devourer. It can die from starvation or other causes. At death, its elements are used as food or returned to the common pool for use elsewhere. Even so do cosmic bodies live off each other, so to speak. When they die, their substance is used for another generation, and their life principles transferred to the celestial bodies next along the line in relationship and time. Plants, planets, even suns perhaps, break up. Then, temporarily, the local balance is upset. Collisions may occur, but not by an unwitting chance. If anything has to be sacrificed or there is a seeming accident, the law makes compensation and makes the necessary adjustments to restore harmony. It must do, or cosmos would soon become chaos, and it doesn't. It would be self-destroying instead of self-preserving. So the law provides not only an overall harmony between all its parts, but it maintains an essential balance in and between them at all levels and in all their functions. All this within a total framework of its knowing what it is doing. At high levels of the hierarchy, this knowing is conscious. There is, so to speak, a program mapped out for levels of development, say for the kingdoms. Each phase has to be achieved. Sometimes this is referred to as the divine plan, but there's no single planner. The plan is, of course, within the law. Everything within the total scheme not only has its immediate place, its own part to play, but it is part of and within the whole evolutionary trend. For everything, there is a stage of perfection. in its sphere and at its level to be achieved in a given time within the grand cycle of the life of whatever we are considering, be it a man, a race, a plant, or a solar system, and so on. We shall see how these cycles apply to our world and human history when we discuss rounds and races in cassette 9. We see, therefore, that evolution is part of a planned program of progress. It may not always be completed. Everything may not achieve its fulfillment, but there is provision in it even for failures. The law, seen as the synthesis of all natural laws, has, to summarize them, the aspects of alternation, cycles within cycles, causation as cause and effect, every effect becoming cause in its turn, balance and harmony, to maintain a total economy throughout the whole field of manifestation and everything in it, and planned progression, evolution, a process whereby everything fulfills its immediate part and also grows to achieve its intended state of perfection within the time scale laid down for it. Intelligence in action via the hierarchies which govern, regulate, and keep the whole vast process going for its allotted span, by manifesting through themselves all the knowledge and power necessary. So we have a very large picture within an even bigger and more marvelous one. But the bigger one is only so in terms of detail, in different aspects of the whole mighty enterprise. Nothing, however, is greater than nor outside the law. It embraces everything. What is important to us as students is the application of this law to ourselves, to our lives. We must first of all know it. Second, we must trust it implicitly. It has no real meaning for us if we do not. In its application to our own circumstance, we have to remember what we are. We are persons at our present levels of action and consciousness, and very much subject to karma. But as individuals, as egos, we are ourselves divine beings, ourselves members of a hierarchy with a function to fulfill. Our function is to perfect our manhood, individually and collectively. The law, so to speak, demands this of us. Of course, we are free not to hear, but the law in the long run cannot be stayed, and as we have seen, not every seed becomes a fully mature adult. We, each of us, have to make the grade planned for us. If too many of us do not, our humanity will have failed to reach the goal. Self-development and growth is not a selfish aim when humanity's lot is held in mind. We know the rules of virtue which lead to spiritual achievement. Let us hear 3 more verses from the Light of Asia about the law. It knows not wrath nor pardon. Utter true its measures meet, its faultless balance weighs. Times are as naught. Tomorrow it will judge, or after many days. By this the slayer's knife did stab himself. The unjust judge hath lost his own defender. The false tongue dooms its lie. The creeping thief and spoiler rob to render. Such is the law which moves to righteousness, which none at last can turn aside or stay. The heart of it is love. The end of it is peace and consummation sweet. Obey. It is, of course, this law, in its two aspects of cycles or alternation and cause and effect, which rules the processes of birth or of rebirth, whichever we are considering. We come into being as persons according to the law, both in the circumstances of our births on each occasion and in our initial endowments and environment. More than these, in the collectivity of our lives, as, so to speak, a stream within the evolutionary process, we now know of a definite terminal goal to the whole series. Mr. W.Q. Judge, in his magazine, The Path, collected a series of aphorisms on karma which he said were given him by teachers, among whom was H.B.B. As the aphorisms summarize succinctly much useful information on karma, a selection is given here. Karma operates on all things and beings from the minutest conceivable atom up to Brahma. Proceeding in the three worlds of men, gods, and the elemental beings, no spot in the manifest universe is exempt from its sway. Karma is not subject to time, and therefore only he who knows what is the ultimate division of time in this universe knows karma. For all other men, karma is in its essential nature unknown and unknowable. But its action may be known by calculation from cause to effect, and this calculation is possible because effect is wrapped up in and is not succeedent to the cause. The karma of this earth is the combination of all the acts and thoughts of all beings of every grade which were concerned in the preceding manvantara or evolutionary scheme from which ours flows. Karmic causes already set in motion must be allowed to sweep on until exhausted, but this permits no man to refuse to help his fellows and every sentient being. In the life of worlds, races, nations, and individuals, karma cannot act unless there is an appropriate instrument provided for its action, and until such appropriate instrument is found, that karma related to it remains unexpended. Then there are aphorisms telling us that unworked out karma is stored without abatement. And finally, every instrument used by any ego in any life is appropriate to the karma operating through it. And lastly, karma is both merciful and just. Mercy and justice are only opposite poles of a single whole, and mercy without justice is not possible in the operations of karma. That which man calls mercy and justice is defective, errant, and impure. Those quotations are from Echoes of the Orient, first volume, pages 313 to 315. This is the end of this side of the second side, the law and reincarnation. We saw on side one of this cassette that two aspects of universal law are alternation or periodicity and cyclic progression. These are exemplified in the rhythms of nature, in the great life pulse, manifesting in the myriads of lesser pulses throughout cosmos as a whole, and all that is in it. These rhythms are exemplified in the orbital and axial motions of the heavenly bodies, and as far as we particularly are concerned, those of the Earth and the Moon. These are on the grand scale. On the smaller scale, we have corresponding cycles in our daily lives, in, for example, the pulse of our heartbeat, the rhythm of our breathing, our sleeping and waking, and even our living and dying. All these mark our passage through time, like the ticking of a clock and its striking of the hours, over and over again, days succeeding days in an irreversible sequence. Against this background, we must examine more closely the workings of the law as it affects mankind, both generally and individually, and see something of his part in the grand evolutionary scheme. We should also see how the workings of the law affect the processes of reincarnation, and how they explain how man may get his deserts in one incarnation as a result of what he did in the previous one. The technicalities of the law's workings in its retributive aspects have not been fully explained to us, and such explanations as we have, or as have been given, require deep insights on our part into the nature of the factors or entities involved, for even a partial understanding. We have mentioned the essential polarities which run through cosmos in manifestation. We have made the point that these polarities are, however, themselves aspects only of one reality, two faces, so to speak, of the same coin. The picture, moreover, is not static. Universal motion pervades everything ceaselessly. There is continuous interplay between the two apparent aspects of any polarity. That interplay is, so to speak, root energy, or, as we have seen before, it is Fohat. There is that which links spirit to matter, subject to object. This something is called by Theosophists Fohat. It is the bridge by which ideas existing in the divine thought are impressed on cosmic substance as the laws of nature. That's from the first volume of The Secret Doctrine, page 16. We've already seen in cassette 3, not only is the universe in and as itself a life, but that it comprises numerous hierarchies, each comprising hosts of lives, and further, that every life is an intelligent entity, performing in its particular way its part in the grand scheme of things. There are many references to this living unity as a diverse multiplicity, and to the part which the hierarchies and the lives composing them play in the workings of the law, including its karmic or retributive aspects. Here are some relevant quotations. First, as we saw on cassette 3, the conscious divine powers are the intelligent beings who adjust and control evolution, embodying in themselves those manifestations of the one law which we know as the laws of nature. That's from the first volume of The Secret Doctrine, page 21. Then we saw on the second side of cassette 3 that the Ahai, Jani Chohans, are the collective hosts of spiritual beings who are the vehicle for the manifestation of the divine or universal thought and will. They are the intelligent forces that give to and enact in nature her laws, while they themselves act according to laws imposed upon them in a similar manner by still higher powers. That's from the first volume of the SD, page 38. And further, we have seen that Fohat is, as an emanation from an entity which is neither God nor devil, but one of the numberless entities that rule and guide our world, according to the eternal law of karma. That's from a footnote to page 111, first volume. We've mentioned Fohat several times, but perhaps we should get some further ideas of his cosmic importance. He is said to be one of the most, if not the most, important character in esoteric cosmogony. In the phenomenal and cosmic world, he is that occult, electric, vital power which, under the will of the creative Logos, unites and brings together all forms, giving them the first impulse, which becomes, in time, law. Fohat, running along the 7 principles of Akasha, acts upon manifested substance, or the one element, and by differentiating it into various centers of energy, sets in motion the law of cosmic evolution. That's from page 110 of Vol 1. These are some of the background considerations which, when we are used to them, condition our thinking about the way in which the law works in its various ways. The cosmic totality is fundamentally intelligent, but it needs agents, qualified, so to speak, to bring about specific effects at all levels of being. These active agents, as we saw, are the elementals, governed by the Jan Chohans. We must never forget that they, that is the elementals, are concerned in every phenomenon in the manifest cosmos. They are the operative powers. Without elementals in their numerous kinds, nature, matter, everything in fact, would be quite dead, unresponsive, insentient, and inactive. Some of them, for example, are behind and involved in the activities of wind, earthquakes, floods, droughts, the responses of flora and fauna to the seasons of the year, etc. Some again are concerned in the dynamics of our thoughts and our feelings, and others in the regulation of our bodily functions. Not only could we not live without them, we simply would not exist. Neither would the earth, nor the sun, nor anything that is in or on them. From this we can easily see that they are, as said, the operative agents of the law, but they are not in themselves the law. They are subject to the superhuman intelligences of the various ascending grades, culminating in what are referred to in the literature as the 4 Maharajas, rectors, or regents, who are the ultimate lords of karma in our system. It should be noted, incidentally, to preserve consistency with the sevenfold nature of cosmos, that these regents are 4 of 7. In the 4th round, we are not concerned with the other 3. To quote, they are the regents or angels who rule over the cosmical forces of north, south, east, west, forces having each a distinct occult property. These beings are connected with karma, as the latter needs physical and material agents to carry out its decrees, such as the 4 kinds of winds, etc. That's from Vol 1, page 122. These 4 direct the activities of the Jan Chohanic hosts, who in turn rule the elementals. We should, however, note carefully the following. It is not the rector or Maharaja who punishes or rewards with or without God's permission or order, but man himself, his deeds or karma, attracting individually and collectively, as in the case of whole nations sometimes, every kind of evil and calamity. We produce causes, and these awaken the corresponding powers in the sidereal world, which powers are magnetically and irresistibly attracted to and react upon those who produce these causes. Whether such persons are practically the evildoers or simply thinkers who brood mischief. Thought is matter, and every particle of existing matter must be a register of all that has happened. See Cassette 4. Every thought, in addition to its physical accompaniment, that is brain change, exhibits an objective, though to us supersensuously objective, aspect on the astral plane. That's from page 124 of Vol 1 and footnote. We can perhaps now have a look again at Fohat in the light of the foregoing about the hierarchies and the elementals. Quoting, "While science speaks of its, that's the one life's, evolution through brute matter, blind force, and senseless motion, the occultists point to intelligent law and sentient life, and add that Fohat is the guiding spirit of all this. He is the messenger of the primordial sons of life and light." That's from page 139 of the first volume. So far, in this section, we have been at pains to demonstrate that from the point of view of esoteric science, the cosmic process is both living and intelligent, with Fohat taking a key place in the process. It is his energy which quickens all the planes and subplanes of cosmic being, which in turn reflect into man's constitution. As it says in stanza 7, sloka 5, the spark hangs from the flame by the finest thread of Fohat. It journeys through the 7 worlds of Maya, or the 7 globes of the planetary chain, and the 7 rounds, or the 49 stations of active existence that are before the spark or monad at the beginning of every great life cycle or manvantara. The thread of Fohat is the thread of life before referred to. This relates to the great problem of philosophy, the physical and substantial nature of life, the independent nature of which is denied by modern science. The reincarnationists and believers in karma alone dimly perceive that the whole secret of life is in the unbroken series of its manifestations, whether in or apart from the physical body. That's from the first volume of the SD, page 238. The 49 fires, whilst here referred to as the stations of active existence in a cosmic sense, also relate to the principles and sub-principles of man's constitution, and the monad, or spark, is, as explained in the commentary on the stanza, jiva, the monad in conjunction with manas, or rather its aroma, that which remains from each personality when worthy, and hangs from Atma Buddhi, the flame, by the thread of life. That's also from page 238. Now this is a description of the process of reincarnation from the top downwards. The monad in conjunction with the aroma of manas, the ego, periodically animating the vehicles of perception and action for gaining experience in the psychic and physical worlds. And this process applies to globes as well as to egos, and is in accordance with analogy and cyclic law. Everything comes and goes in due season. A question incidental to our theme here, but interesting, is often asked as to whether there's a definite and finite number of human monads associated with our Earth, incarnating over and over again, with only a part of their number in incarnation at any one time. The answer: there must be a limited number of monads evolving and growing more and more perfect through their assimilation of many successive personalities in every new manvantara. This is absolutely necessary in view of the doctrines of rebirth, karma, and the gradual return of the human monad to its source, absolute deity. Thus, although the hosts of more or less progressed monads are almost incalculable, they are still finite, as is everything in this universe of differentiation and finiteness. There is an eternal concatenation of causes and effect, and a perfect analogy which runs through and links together all the lines of evolution. One begets the other, globes as personalities. That's from the first volume of the Secret Doctrine, page 171. This gaining of experience in the spiritual, the inmost realms of being, as they pertain to both the great and the small, brings us to a consideration of how we, individually, as persons, come to be as we are, and what part we, as individuals, play in the workings of the law. We have seen that the elementals are the operative agents of the law. We have also seen that Akasha and the astral light are, at their respective levels, the reservoirs of all experience. They are literally the seat of memory of the various levels of cosmic being. It's by way of these two factors, the elementals and universal memory, that the fruit of what was becomes the seed of what will be. The pattern of what is to be has been determined by all the conditioning factors in the past to which we, singly or collectively, have contributed, and are impressed into nature's unfading memory, which in turn is known to the Maharajas or regents, the lords of karma. The dynamism that brings forth the new order in due season and in accordance with patterns so established is Fohat and the elemental life. This is the generality of the process. In the case of individual man, HPB explains the origins of his personal makeup in a new life on earth as follows. The latter, that's occultism, teaches that A. The life atoms of our life principle, prana, are never entirely lost when a man dies. That the atoms best impregnated with the life principle, an independent, eternal, conscious factor, are partially transmitted from father to son by heredity, and partially are drawn once more together and become the animating principle of the new body in every new incarnation of the monads. Because B, as the individual soul is ever the same, so are the atoms of the lower principles, body, its astral, or life double, etc., drawn as they are by affinity and karmic law, always to the same individuality in a series of various bodies, etc., etc. That's from the second volume of the SD, page 671. For a more complete understanding of the reincarnating processes as they affect the personal characteristics with which we are born, the above paragraph should be read bearing in mind the nature of the auric envelope and its function as the accumulator of karma, as that in which the new astral body is formed. In lay parlance, the process is one of reanimation at the dawn of a new earth life, of the dormant residual properties and qualities, the skandhas, formed as a result of all the previous actions and experiences of the previous personality. The process is, however, universal as well as individual. The law of analogy applies. In the cosmic auric envelope is all the karma of the manifesting universe. Jiva is everywhere, and so with the other principles. That's from the third volume of The Secret Doctrine, page 555. When a new universe is to come into being, its processes are started in the same way as for a man, the smaller reflecting the greater. Further, the teaching says that the karma of a planet, for example, is the collective karma of the beings it has nurtured. It is in the latter sense that individual man plays his part in the evolutionary development of his planet, and similarly even that of the solar system. In the aggregate, the thoughts and actions of men determine the karma of their world. A further factor which helps us to understand the working of the law is that it has inner as well as its outer manifestations. Although in one respect cycles can be regarded as mechanistically objective, like tidal ebb and flow, the actual rising and falling of the tide, they have an inner aspect which affects the quality of life. There are times, like the seasons, when qualitative aspects of life can and do manifest, as in periods of peace and strife. This raises the question of predestination and free will. Here are some quotations which help us to see and understand these tides. There is a purpose in every important act of nature, whose acts are all cyclic and periodical. There is a predestination in the geological life of our globe, as in the history, past and future, of races and nations. This is closely associated with what we call karma. That's from the first volume of The Secret Doctrine, page 640. Using the axial revolution of our planet as a simile, HBB said in Isis Unveiled, the revolution of the physical world is attended by a like revolution in the world of the intellect, the spiritual evolution of the world proceeding in cycles like the physical one. Thus we see in history a regular alternation of ebb and flow in the tide of human progress. The great kingdoms and empires of the world, after reaching the culmination of their greatness, descend again in accordance with the same law by which they ascended, till, having reached the lowest point, humanity reasserts itself and mounts up once more. The height of its being by this law of ascending progression by cycles being somewhat higher than the point from which it had before descended. That's from the first volume of Isis, page 34. But these cycles, wheels within wheels, do not affect all mankind at one and the same time. SD1, page 641. Again, we have karma nemesis is the creator of nations and mortals, but once created, it is they who make of her a fury or a rewarding angel. There is no return from the paths she cycles over. Yet those paths are of our own making, for it is we, collectively and individually, who prepare them. Karma nemesis is the synonym of providence, minus design, goodness, and every other finite attribute and qualification. An occultist or a philosopher will not speak of the goodness or cruelty of providence, but identifying it with karma nemesis, he will teach that nevertheless it guards the good and watches over them in this as in future lives, and that it punishes the evildoer, aye, even to his 7th rebirth. So long, in short, as the effect of his having thrown into perturbation even the smallest atom in the infinite world of harmony has not been finally readjusted. For the only decree of karma, an eternal and immutable decree, is absolute harmony in the world of matter as it is in the world of spirit. It is not therefore karma that rewards or punishes, but it is we who reward or punish ourselves, according to whether we work with, through, and along with nature, abiding by the laws on which that harmony depends, or breaks them. Nor would the ways of karma be inscrutable were men to work in union and harmony instead of disunion and strife. For our ignorance of these ways would surely disappear if we would but attribute all these to their correct cause. With right knowledge, or at any rate with a confident conviction that our neighbours will no more hurt us than we would think of hurting them, the 2/3 of the world's evil would vanish into thin air. That's from the first volume of The Secret Doctrine, page 642. At the end of the chapter of which the above is part, HBB expands on how humankind could improve its lot by heeding the dictates of natural law, all encompassed in the idea of harmony. She also relates the cycles which affect man's destiny to the planetary aspects, astrologically. The solar system is a unity. Every body within it affects with its particular influence every other body within the system. We too, individually, are part of that system and are subject to planetary influences, some of the characteristics of which are built into our personal natures. Not only is this the case, but, quoting, "the star under which a human entity is born will remain forever its star throughout the whole cycle of its incarnations in one Manvantara." But this is not his astrological star. The latter is concerned and connected with the personality, the former with the individuality. The angel of that star, or the Jnani Buddha, will be either the guiding or simply the presiding angel, so to say, in every new rebirth of the monad, which is part of his own essence, though his vehicle, man, may remain forever ignorant of this fact. This is another way in which we can envisage man's intimate relationship with the planets. That quotation was from first volume of Secret Doctrine 572. We've talked much of harmony, of cycles, of cause and effect as aspects of the law. We ought perhaps to finish on its purposive aspect, evolution. Evolution is the process by which the potentialities of spirit are unfolded in the infinite kinds and numbers of beings which give it expression. When the man stage is reached, the law not only propels man along the evolutionary path in her tidal cycles, but she could also be regarded as his teacher. In life he must act, and it is the law that reacts to his actions, bringing him comfort, happiness and health, or misery, disease and discomfort, in so many ways. Not knowing the law, he acts in ignorance of it. His nature has been molded by the past, his past. He acts according to this, insofar as he has learned, albeit subconsciously, to act according to the dictates of the law, having due regard to his fellows and their essential rights and interests, insofar as he has regard for them, as fellow human beings, he will sow harmony. Insofar as he acts inconsiderately and selfishly, he sows disharmony, and his lot in life will reflect it. He may then be led to pray for an alleviation of his state, maybe ascribing his present condition to mere chance or to a fortuitously dispensed providence. But most certainly chance is impossible. There is no chance in nature, wherein everything is mathematically coordinate and mutually related in its units. That's from SD1, page 653. There is one eternal law in nature, one that always tends to adjust contraries and to produce final harmony. It is owing to this law of spiritual development, superseding the physical and purely intellectual, that mankind will become freed from its false gods and find itself finally self-redeemed. That's from Secret Doctrine 2, page 420, and that's the end of this cassette.